I'll be thinking, I wonder if it can do math, because I'm not going to write a paper with ChatGPT. I won't do that. But if it can do my calculus for college, then
I think math would be the thing it's best at. I don't think it would do humor.
You would think, but it can't.
Really?
It can't do the math, and it can be funny. It can tell you a joke or write a weird little story down, but it can't do.
And it can't do hands.
No, it can't. No, it definitely can't. Not without like an extra finger.
Right. Exactly. Anyway,
my camera look okay, or should I bring it up a bit like that?
Whatever. Yeah. No, that's good. That's good. Yeah.
Yeah, we can leave it like that.
How about mine? Because that's
yours is perfect.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Every now and then I'll finish a podcast and look back at it, and I'm like, man, my camera is not quite there. I'll have it like that, and I'm like, oh no, it's not quite that bad, but you know. Welcome back to the ultimate unofficial VeggieTales podcast. Today I'm here with a big idea OG and voice of Dad Asparagus, Dan Anderson.
That's right, Finn.
Man, surreal. And I'm telling you, I'm not just saying it because I've got you on the show. Top 5 VeggieTales character for me.
Okay, well, there are only about 5, so that's, maybe not.
Like number 1.
Number 1, yeah. Well, I'm sure Larry is probably number 1 in everybody's mind because everybody wants to be playful. But I appreciate that. Although I'm a participant, first and foremost, I'm a fan like everybody else. I love to talk about VeggieTales. It was part of my kids growing up. So let's talk about VeggieTales. I'd love to share from my perspective.
Well, we'll jump right in because I know you talked to Reziel and Lunch over on What's the Big Idea podcast. We keep in touch a little bit, and we kind of try to like tag team it to an extent.
Yeah.
And he got you on the show. I'm like, okay, I want to talk to him too because I've got my own set of questions. But I'm sure you covered this in their podcast. But I'd like to kind of reiterate for people who are first timers here. How did you get involved with VeggieTales? What led you to get cast as Dad Asparagus?
Sure, and I generally get 2 kind of main questions that people ask when they hear that I'm Dad Asparagus, and that's certainly one of them. The other question is, Dad what? Right, and that keeps a person humble. But yeah, how? So this sounds funny when I say this. It goes back into the 1900s. So, which sounds like forever ago now, like Ma and I were in our prairie schooner going across America or something. But back in 87, we started going to a church in Chicago. There were about 60 people. It was called Park Community Church. And one thing they did, and this was really popular back then, is there was a drama every Sunday morning that introduced the topic. And I started writing those. And they were a lot of fun. Being in Chicago, a lot of people who attended, they went to Second City or Comedy Theater or any kind of theater the night before. So we felt we really needed to up the game on the drama. So we had a lot of fun. We had some great actors who want to be actors, and some who were kind of successful. I got to tap into and bring them into the drama as well. One night we were at a party and somebody said, "Hey, you need to talk to Phil. He's starting to write dramas also." So we sat down and established a friendship, and our wives and the 4 of us became friends. And he would share this idea he had of talking limbless vegetables that reinforce biblical principles. And we're like, okay, whatever. It sounded like this weird pipe dream, like he was going to buy a bunch of Huskies and a sled and take it to the North Pole. I mean, it seemed about as realistic, right? But the next thing we know, he somehow had gotten the funds to buy enough computerization, which back then you needed a lot because they were not very powerful. And he had this thing he created. And so they said, "Hey, come to our place. We'll show you what he created." And it was like a little demo to try to sell the idea. So we go over there, we have supper, we sit down, and we're all ready for this, big presentation. And he puts the VHS tape in. Maybe your viewers don't know what a VHS tape is. Google it. And on the screen pop Bob and Larry, and it's like a kitchen counter. And they turn and look at the camera, and that's it. It's like 5 seconds. And he'd been working for months.
Oh.
my wife and I kind of look at each other. Are we supposed to clap? Is that it? Is there more? That was it. That was a little demo reel. But we saw just from that, this was going to be something special. Well, about maybe a month or so later, when they had the script written and they're writing it, and they had parents. And so they got someone to be the mom. And so they had no budget. It was a shoestring budget. So they couldn't really hire people to do this. So both Mike and Phil were kind of experimenting with a voice to try to sound like a legitimate dad, but it kept sounding like the goofy guys trying to sound serious, and it just wasn't working. So I imagine what happened is they said, okay, we gotta solve this. So they probably got out a blank sheet of paper and said, what qualifications do we need for someone to do dad? And the first thing on the list was probably needs to be able to read. Okay. And second of all, work for free. In fact, there was probably a number 3. If we could get someone who would actually pay us to be involved, that'd be even better. And I'm sure Phil went, I know, Dan Anderson. I think he can read because I've seen him write scripts, and I know he'll work for free. And so I get a call one day. He goes, hey, I want you to do a voice for me. And at first I didn't even know what he meant. I go, okay, hi. I don't know what he meant. He goes, no, I need you to record a voice. It's a dad character. I go, okay, all right. Just sounded like kind of a fun lark. Didn't know where it would go. And so kind of the rest is history. And from then on, I got to be Dad Asparagus.
Which is so cool for it to start off like that, like a small team of people putting together one VHS tape, and then you all ended up in theaters. How did that feel? Like, you did a few VeggieTales videos, and then
correct,
making a movie now, and now you hear your voice on the big screen. Yeah.
I think that's my favorite part about being involved, to see it up close. Go from, when you say a small team, 3 people.
Yeah,
3 people. That's a pretty small team. The thing that made it happen, though, is Phil is one of those unique people who has both a high ability at technology, but also on the other part of the brain, just off the charts creative. And he was able to meld those 2 together, or switch back and forth. And that was the driving power behind it. But every time I'd go to record, it seemed like they had moved to a bigger setting. And eventually they had their own sound booth, which was a little more sophisticated than the broom closet on the first episode. With they had like moving pads on the walls, and this broom, literally a broom closet. Then they had their own recording booth. That was kind of impressive, although it was near a railroad track, and every now and then you'd have to stop because a train was coming. And then they were in a mall, as you probably know the story. I mean, now it's huge with hundreds of people. So it was fun to see somebody who had a dream, didn't really know how to do it, but he was so committed to that dream and had such a passion for it that he figured it out and he made it work. I think that, to me, is the greatest story, and I think should be inspiring to anybody with a dream.
Yeah, and you can tell he cared a lot about it, like from the get-go.
Absolutely.
Making I don't want to say good, but making quality Christian content for kids that everyone can enjoy, and make it CGI and sell enough to make the next one. All of that at that point, I'm guessing, sounded pretty impossible, right? And he pulled it off.
Well, for many reasons. One, there wasn't much in the way of digital animation. So even that seemed like they were breaking ground and having to invent ways to do it. But then to try to get into a market and competing against bigger companies or whatever, it just seemed a little improbable. But again, he had the vision, he had the passion. So it's a good lesson.
Yeah, he cared a lot about it. What was going on in your head whenever Phil tells you that you guys are going to make a movie? Did you think it would come to fruition? Did you think it would happen? Or were you like, okay, we'll give it a shot?
Well, when you say a movie, you mean like Jonah, or you mean just another video?
Jonah, like a big
Jonah
feature.
By the time I heard about it, it was way down the road. So I wouldn't hear about it early on when they were in the planning stages. I mean, he may have mentioned that he had the vision to make a movie. But by the time that came along, he had been so successful in so many, making so many videos. I think LarryBoy 2D was out, and I think 3-to-1 Penguins
Mhm.
So that wasn't surprising. I don't remember him ever saying, "Hey, I'm going to make a movie." Usually, by the time I hear about it, it's like, "Hey, here's a script, and can you come record on such and such a day?" The thing that was always interesting, especially in the case of Jonah, is I wasn't given the full script. I was just given my pages. So sometimes I didn't even really understand the story. I just had to like give my read, and then I'd see later what the story was all about, which was kind of a fun, path of discovery for me. But I never got to the point where I said, "Oh, that'll never happen." Once he got over the hurdle of getting the first few going, then it was totally believable that he was on his way.
Yeah, the sky was the limit, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that'd be pretty cool. Hearing your voice in in anything, because I've actually got the mail-in tapes here, the original mail-in tapes. Um,
Yeah.
and
Wow.
getting your voice in a video that's being distributed through mail, even people are watching it, got to be really cool. Then you get that stuff in Walmart or Target, and you're going to a store to go buy
Yeah,
and you see a VHS with your voice on it, and you're like, "Oh my gosh!"
it's crazy.
Then
Yeah.
to be in a theater, and now you're officially a movie actor by definition.
Well, and the first time I saw it in the theater was a great experience because it was the preview for all people involved in VeggieTales.
Mhm.
It was people who were creators, then the voice people, of course, and their families. And it was in a theater down in Chicago, actually attached to where we had our first apartment in Chicago. So there were probably maybe 300. There were quite a few people there. But what made it fun is any little thing that came on the screen. I mean, I remember this one part vividly. In the movie, at one point, there's a gate that opens, and there was a team of a few who animated that gate. And when that came up, they all cheered. They cheered their gate. And when a character would come on, they would cheer for that character. So that was a unique way to see the movie the first time.
Oh, we need a bootleg of that.
Well, I wish that existed. That would be fun to have, as right, a video of the people watching the video for the first time. That would be awesome. I don't think it exists, but I would cherish that. Yeah. Just a fun family. It was just such a family feel, as you can imagine.
Yeah. You guys really were a tight team of people. I think even as you all grew, from what I've gathered, you all stayed, really.
Kind of, although I mean, at one point there's, I don't know what it grew to, over 200. And you can't, I mean, I certainly didn't know all those people, the core, of course. So I'll tell a tale on Phil. He'll laugh at this. At one point, and I'm trying to remember where this was. I think it was in one of the office in Chicago. When I came in to record, there was somebody working the soundboard, and then Phil would direct. And so when I came in, the guy sitting there, and he goes, "This is what's your name?" I said, "Phil, have you gotten so big you don't know all the people that work for you?" And he goes, "Well, he's just an intern." So I think it had a family feel, but certainly I didn't know everybody by then. I mean, I'd walk in and there's like people everywhere walking around, and I had no idea what they all did.
Yeah. I guess as it grew, that would be expected.
Yeah.
Now, when you got cast as Dad, when Phil had you try out for him, were there any other characters he wanted you to try out for? Because I know they would try to double up on that and have
right. Well, no, but sometimes they would just say, "Oh, you got to say some voices." They just need it for like background, like, "Oh yeah," just kind of just toss out the ad lib things like that. Some of the songs I sang on, just background. But first of all, I never auditioned for Dad. He just said, "Come in and do it." I think he knew I would sound like a dad. The funny thing is, by 93, I had a 2-year-old. And so most of his direction was pretend like you're talking to Molly. And that made it kind of more real. But yeah, I never auditioned, and he never really asked to do any other character, just kind of background.
Gotcha.
Which was fine. I was happy to be just Dad.
You sang in the intro too, right? That was.
I think so. I can't remember. I mean, that was way long ago. Just kind of background. I don't even know if you could pick it out. Just kind of background. Yeah.
You've more or less, I guess, answered this question. I was going to ask if there was any specific caricature or individual that you referenced when performing the character, but I guess it just kind of came from you, right? And how you would speak as a dad.
Kind of, right. And he would just always remind me to talk up a little higher, talk kind of more up here. "Well, Junior," right? Or we're right here, Mr. Nezzer. And then they would take it and tweak it. There used to be a really interesting clip or a little compilation on YouTube, and I can't find it. Maybe you'll go out and find it, where somebody put together, it was like the many voices of Dad Asparagus, because they weren't consistent. And sometimes I'd be Ray up high, and other times it would just be my natural voice, which was pretty funny. And somewhere that exists.
I love
So,
that.
you know, they just talk high and pretend like you're talking to Molly.
Oh man.
And Phil's directions were always fun. He go, well, do it again, but do it different. And so he kind of left it up to me to just, try and do something kind of a bit different. So
Yeah. I know in voice acting in general, they'll make you do like 2 or 3 different takes, right? And then pick from them and go with the best one.
right. And so you mentioned movies, and Jonah, gosh, I'm going to forget his name now. He was Khalid, and he directed the voices for that, and it was very different. And he was much more precise. It'd be like, okay, when you say here, put more emphasis on the beginning and then drop off. I mean, very precise in his direction, which was, I think that was really good. It was really good.
Yeah, I think you're referring to Tim Hodge.
That's it. Thank you. Yep.
Tim Hodge. Yeah, he's fantastic.
Yeah, he was a good guy to work with. Yep.
Now, as the series progressed, I know VeggieTales they've gone on a roller coaster of different owners and buyout and whatnot.
Yeah.
When they first got bought out, did you know that you were going to be able to continue, or were you not sure yet if they'd call you back?
Yeah. I knew that Phil was going to keep writing, and he was still going to be doing the voices. So I knew he would have a lot of probably say. I don't know if that ever came up as a discussion. What I didn't know is that it was going to move to Nashville. As soon as I heard that, then I figured probably the writing is on the wall, because Dad only has a few lines, honestly. So I come in at the beginning sometimes and say, now Junior, make sure you don't do whatever, and of course then he does it, and then at the end, Dad comes back in to wrap it up, and we're not going to do that again, are we? So at first I was flying to Nashville, and I did think, wow, this is kind of expensive just for somebody to walk in and say 3 lines. And then after a while, I would go to a recording studio in the Chicago area and just do it remote. But at first, I kind of assumed they wanted to keep things consistent, and they did. So that was kind of a nice thing. But after a while, I think they figured that's crazy to make me to fly me. So that's when they made the change.
Well, there's only one in the original run, right? From 93 to 2015, which is a pretty long run for a TV show in general. But there was only one time where he wasn't voiced by you that I can think of, at least.
Right.
And it was like one of the final 10 shows they did. It was J. Chris Wall, and he had like 1 line. And I guess they weren't going to fly you down for 1 line, right? But Penniless Princess, there's a whole deleted scene. You know what I'm referring to. I'm sure it does all blur together after a while.
Yeah, it does.
Captain Crew, right? And you come in and...
I think I'm trying to remember. There was an episode. I think maybe that was the episode where Dad was like a main character interacting with Junior, and I went and recorded it. I mean, it was pretty extensive. It was a whole, half hour or whatever. But after they kind of reviewed it all, they thought there wasn't enough energy, because Dad's kind of laid back, and that's kind of the way they directed it. But they decided to redo it and have Larry. So that might have been a deleted scene from what I recorded. I have no idea. And it made sense, because, Larry is, he's crazy. Come on, let's not him on. And that is inconsistent for Dad to suddenly be that high energy. And so it kind of made sense. So maybe that's where that's from. I honestly can't remember.
That could be, yeah. So. We have the scene, though. If you haven't seen it in a while, remind me to text it to you.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great. I may have never seen it. I probably never saw it.
In our little community, it does bum us out, because that was maybe one of 2 times ever where Dad Asparagus was allowed to sing in the show. He had a whole number. It was like a 2.5-minute number And
Yeah.
people go, "Oh my gosh, he's so good at singing. He carried the tune."
Well, the other place is in Madame Blueberry.
In Madame Blueberry, yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And that I love that song. It's such a sweet song.
Hmm.
And Lisa, who does Junior, she's got a beautiful voice. So it was a duet, although we didn't sing it as a duet. We recorded it separately, which was always interesting.
Now,
Okay.
2014, the show has gone up and down, up and down. A lot of different people, a lot of different direction, different. I guess you'd call it like a reboot in 2010. They kind of redid the intro and kind of took it in a new direction, but kept making the same show. Now, 2014, they completely rehaul it, right? New designs, new voice cast for half the characters.
Right.
And Dad Asparagus was back. He was a relatively big character. They called him Captain Mike.
Right.
Was there any thought of coming back to that, or did they just go, "Yeah, we got Rob Paulson. He'll be everyone"?
Yeah. Was that for Netflix?
Yeah.
I have no idea what the discussion was. And I honestly didn't even know about that till much later. I know they were running, I think I'd call them the classic ones on a station in Chicago for a while around that time. But I didn't even know about the Netflix till well after. So I don't know what the discussion was. That's usually the way it would work. I would always find out once production was quite a ways down the way, the script was written and approved, and then I'd get called in. So I never was a part of hearing the discussions ahead of time.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was missing that Dad Asparagus touch. It really was.
Well,
we love Rob Paulson. We do love him, and he did fantastic work. But he was already half the characters. It would have been okay if he wasn't Dad too. You could have been.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, it was missing the sweetness, I think, of the original. You could tell Phil's input was not as strong. Mm-hmm. Maybe not even a part of it. I have no idea, but the sweetness and the innocence and a lot of that was missing. And so I watched your conversation with Phil, mm-hmm. and I think he summed it up so well. How the original vision was kind of lost, where it's Bob trying to put on this show, if you will, and Larry trying to help, but going a little overboard, and that whole aspect was kind of missing, which was kind of a shame. That was kind of the heart and soul of it. So
yeah, I would agree. That was kind of what made the show. Like Phil said, it has a very basic formula, a very simple very simple character designs, and a very simple formula. But you can get complicated with it as you carry it and as you write the scripts out. But when you take that formula and you change it, then you've got a different show.
Yeah, and the way we used to talk about it is when it started out, the creative was really high, mm-hmm. but the technical aspect was kind of low. Because the budget, that's what the budget dictated. But as my career has been a freelance writer, script writer for business productions, so I'm always partial to writing. And I'll see a movie where the effects and everything are just amazing, but the story is not any good. And so to me, the story is kind of king. And I think probably Phil would agree with that. And the story kind of started to suffer, even though the technology increased, which was a shame.
Yeah. If you watch the Netflix show, you kind of have to go, I'm not watching VeggieTales. I'm watching.
Right. That's a good point. Right. I think that's a good way to view it. Yeah, correct.
It definitely doesn't have the calmness of the original show. I mean, it doesn't have any calmness at all. It's bouncing off the walls. I mean, you heard the interview with Phil.
I did.
We talked all about that. Yeah, definitely just a different show altogether.
And the characters looked a little different. And I mean, I kind of gave him grace on that, because if I had seen those characters first, maybe that would have seemed like VeggieTales to me. You know what I mean? Kind of an analogy. I'm from Chicago, so of course, sorry to some of your other viewers, but we have the greatest pizza in the world. But there's a pizza place, and I won't say the name of it, that's kind of popular, but it's more like a cracker with tomato sauce on it, and everybody in my family kind of likes it, and I don't as much. But if I look at it not as pizza, but a different category, then I'm okay eating it. So it's the same thing. I think that's a valid point.
Yeah, comparison can kind of kill enjoyment, I think.
Right.
Yeah. But I can imagine, though, being the creators of, like Phil, having originated the show and been such a key part of it, to watch it be different than his vision and to hear them go, we don't need any help would be very frustrating.
It would be. Absolutely. To just discount everything that he poured into it and what made it successful, I think disheartening and even confusing. Why wouldn't they want that?
I'm sure. Yeah. And do you know about oh boy, we got to talk about this. The movie they're making.
Yeah, I don't know too much about it. I heard, I can't remember where I heard through the grapevine. So time will tell.
Oh boy, yeah.
It's a little scary to think about. I mean,
isn't it?
It's LarryBoy, right?
Yeah, it is LarryBoy.
So, I mean, if any character you can kind of go over the top with, it would be LarryBoy.
Mm-hmm.
But hopefully it'll be a good story, first and foremost.
We'll find out. I'm definitely hoping. I know a good portion of the original people are on it. Mike is allegedly on it.
Yeah.
But I don't think Phil is, from what he told me. Which
it's hard to imagine LarryBoy without Mike's voice.
Yeah.
Someone could try to duplicate it, but it would never be the same.
No, you can't do that. But I was talking to a buddy about the movie, and he goes, well, if they get Mike, and there's nothing I'm saying here that hasn't been said by Phil publicly anyway.
Right.
My buddy was like, if they get Mike on the show and they don't get Phil on the show, imagine LarryBoy sounding like LarryBoy, but Alfred not sounding like Alfred, right? Like, wouldn't that be
right?
Mike, but not Phil with Mike.
Yeah. And I guess it depends who they're aiming for. If they're aiming for kids, they really won't care.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But the parents might go, that's weird. So,
yeah. Or the nerds and, adult,
of course,
children like me and my people.
Well, the world doesn't care about the nerds, even though they're taking over, but that's okay.
Unfortunately, maybe one day. So the VeggieTales show, I guess kind of the same thing as a Netflix show, but they brought it more back to form. Phil and Mike were back on the team. And knowing Phil and Mike were back on the team and Kurt, was there any thought about Dad coming back for that? Because that feels more likely than the Netflix show.
Right. That's true. I have no idea what went on and what they're talking about. Like I said before, by the time I would ever hear about it, everything was all decided and the ball was rolling. So I have no idea if that was in the discussion or not. No idea.
Well, it would have
obviously not. He didn't. I didn't show up in it, and that's fine.
Well,
although I will point out, let me point out, in the movie, the pirates who don't do anything, right? Was Dad in that?
He was in the background. He wasn't in the.
Yeah, but he was not. He was not, and that's why the pirates didn't do anything. I like to point out, because Dad was not in their lives to have that positive influence. Not that I'm bitter or anything.
Right? I didn't even think about that. That would explain it. I bet it would have been a box office success. Would have swept the nation had Dad been
right.
in.
Or it would have been a boring movie, because it would have been the pirates that got busy and got a college education or got a trade and were positive, influence in society. That's probably not as exciting of a movie. So,
but if it had Dad, you could make that sacrifice. It'd be worth it.
I guess. Yeah, that's what I'd like to think.
So I guess we kind of touched on this with the movie, but you're one of the key original crew members, and whenever we're talking about VeggieTales and what made VeggieTales great, we've got a little list of people that we think about, who originated it, and you're definitely one of those people who
I appreciate that.
Brought up quite frequently. So as a Big Idea OG, do you think the series could make a comeback on the scale it was before? Because I know you lived through the hype of VeggieTales, the peak of the show when people couldn't get enough of it. Could it get there again?
Yeah, that's an interesting question that I'd not thought about before. I mean, certainly the message that was in every VeggieTales is still valid. Bringing in the biblical perspective is still valid. So we have a 3-year-old, and she watches I call them the classic, and she loves them. So kids of that age would certainly, that would resonate with them. I think the hurdle is everybody feels like it has to be better, and it has to be more technically interesting. And so I don't know, maybe it's just too hard to overcome that hurdle to say, let's take a step back, make it simpler, and go back to the sweetness. If anybody came along with that vision and said, Phil, and Mike, but especially Phil, take this and do what you did before, then it could happen. So that's what it's going to take, the vision on somebody probably who has the money, and maybe they would have to buy, VeggieTales. I don't know what it would take. If Phil was involved, there'd be a good chance that it could. Yeah.
Well, I thought that too. Yeah, I think you have to have the people who made it work come back to make it work like that again. Otherwise, you get the Netflix show, which worked, but to a different crowd of people.
Right.
And you don't get that original sweetness. And then another thing I've never been able to grasp, as the show got bigger and bigger and it got bought out more and more times, it would get more and more complicated. But the original stuff was what people go back to. They continue to go back to that. So looking at that now, why wouldn't anybody, or the people in charge currently, go, okay, the first decade or two of VeggieTales is what people like the most? And that wasn't, I mean, if you try to replicate that now, it'll be a lot cheaper than it was back then. Mm-hmm. It wouldn't cost a horrible amount to animate like that.
Right.
The original, models and animation style couldn't be that expensive. If you all could do it in the 90s, I'm sure it could be done now. Why wouldn't they try that? They know it worked and they know people like it.
Yeah, and maybe the time will be right where someone will realize all of the different versions. They tried the higher tech or whatever, and maybe it'll just become natural and make sense. So here's hoping. It'd be fun to see that.
Yeah, I'd like a return to form. Like I said, I'm pretty open to change, and the Netflix show I enjoyed, but if you could just bring it back to what it used to be. And as a fan of the show, I care about the people behind it, and seeing what Phil's going through with it is definitely frustrating.
It'd really be fun to see him get a hold of those characters and put his spin and his breath of life back into them. I mean, I know, and obviously he's talked about it in his book. I mean, to all your viewers, I hope they've read his book, Me, Myself, and Bob. That's just such a great encapsulation of the whole story and why he was okay with and maybe even happy that it all kind of crumbled just for his own spirituality. Yeah. And if it could come back and not take him down that same path, that's what would be important. But honestly, I don't think it would. Just as well as I know Phil, he is so cautious of that now. And he doesn't want to build a big empire. I think if he could just use his characters and tell stories again, he'd be, I don't know, in heaven, I guess. He'd be so happy, and it'd be so fun to see him to be able to do that.
Yeah, and you can reach a lot of people with Bob and Larry. Everyone knows Bob and Larry.
The thing about that is, if you think about some old TV shows, if they want to recreate it, you can't use the actors because now they're old, right? The kids are now grandparents. But with this, everybody they can still sound pretty much the same.
Yeah.
And so you could reanimate it in that same look. You have Lisa, who's Junior. So Junior is still going to sound the same. And I mean, everybody would. It really could be recaptured.
We got Dad right here.
I hope. Yeah. I mean, I haven't smoked or anything, so I don't sound like that. So,
a different take on the character, right?
Right. Grandpa Asparagus.
That could work.
Yeah, I guess it could. Right. No, I hope nobody ever does that. Junior grown up and
oh boy, no, we don't need that. Like a 10 years later type of show.
Because he was, well, let's see, when it came out, he was roughly 9 or so. So now he'd be going on 40. That would just be disturbing. Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad.
Well, see, you could voice Junior.
Maybe. There we go.
That'd be interesting. Now, this wasn't on our question list. I don't want to catch you off guard with the thing that wasn't on the plan. But I do try to touch on this when I'm talking to crew members. When you think back over your time on the show, all the years you were working on it, what are some stories that pop out as maybe the funniest or the most, interesting, I guess, of your time?
I guess one story that was interesting to me was Madame Blueberry, because I had never met Madame Blueberry before. I think Megan was her name. We met at the airport when we landed in Nashville, and we both kind of converged on a guy holding up a sign that said "Big Idea," and that's where we met. She goes, "Oh, you're Madame Blueberry. Oh, you're Dad Asparagus." And one of the first things she said, and I think she said that the same thing to almost everybody she encountered as we went. She goes, "By the way, I'm in a play in Chicago tonight, and I can't miss my flight because I don't have an understudy." So I was kind of surprised she agreed to do that, because that's a big deal if you don't show up and you don't have an understudy. Yeah. So we go into the recording studio, and Dad goes first. And I didn't have a lot of lines, as typical, but it took a little while to go through and, the reads, and sang a song. So that always took a little bit more. And then Megan got into the sound booth, and I'm sitting out, I'm kind of watching this whole thing. And I'm also watching the time. And in the back of my mind, I kind of knew what time we had to leave to get to the airport in time based on how long it took us to get there. So the day goes on, and she has a lot of lines, right? Mm-hmm. By the way, did an amazing job. And now we're getting close to the time where we need to leave. And I could tell she's getting a little nervous. Yeah. Now we're past the time that we should leave. And now we're way past the time we should leave. And finally, and she goes, and can we do that one more time? And she was a true professional, but I could tell she's getting antsy. Finally, we're done. She's done. And she was like a BB, shot out of a BB gun right through the lobby, and let's go. And I'm chasing off after her, and we hop in the car, and the driver, he's like Mario Andretti. I mean, he's just going through traffic. And we get to the airport, and she was not real tall. She was kind of small, and I'm 6'2". I got long legs. I could barely keep up with her. She was just sprinting down the terminal. We get there, we had our boarding passes, we get on, and literally within probably 3 or 4 minutes, they closed the door. It was that close.
Oh my gosh.
And so I always want to do this. And someday I want to listen and watch, and just listen to her voice and see from the start to the finish if it sounds more stressed as the recording went on, right?
I'm gonna have to listen for that now. Yeah.
What amazing, I know the last time I watched it was a while ago. I know the first time when I watched it, I expected, because I had seen her recording, that I was going to picture her in the studio, right? When I heard her voice. But she did such a great job of bringing that character to life, that as soon as I saw the character, I forgot all about her in the studio. It just seemed like, that character seemed so real. So kudos to her. I hope she watches this. Just a consummate professional, and it was fun to watch and be a part of. But yeah, I'll never forget that. It was a little nerve-wracking, even for me, and I had nothing to get back to. So
how did you all cast her? How did you all meet her and get her involved with the show?
Well, I am not a part of we. That would be something that Phil, that's a Phil question, and whomever else was, part of the production team. Somehow, I think she was an actor. Obviously, she was doing a play that night. So somehow somebody must have known of her. Maybe Jim Poole, because he was big kind of in the acting scene back then. He may have made a reference. But yeah, I have no idea. And she may have auditioned. I don't know, because that was it was so important to have someone who was able to do that dialect and sound cartoony. You couldn't just pull somebody off the street. So that's a good question. I'm going to ask Phil that next time I see him, how he found her, because she was so perfect.
Do you and Phil still see, I guess in church you guys see each other, right?
No, we don't live that close in Chicago. I mean, you can be in Chicago and be an hour apart, hour and a half apart. We're probably about that. It's been a little while. We went out to lunch a few years back, and I think we're going to get together this summer. I hope. I'm going to reach out, because it's been a while. He's been busy. We've been busy. But what's interesting when we do, it's like no time expired, right? I'm sure you have friends like that where you may not have seen them for a while, and you get back together. And I think last time we didn't even talk about VeggieTales that much,
Yeah.
just because the friendship was a little beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, as you can well imagine, a lot of fun to go out to lunch with and recount some of our experiences. We collaborated on some dramas at church. We were both panhandlers, and a guy came along and he needed money for the train, and he had given us money before, and he was asking if he'd get a rebate because he needed money. I mean, it was just kind of we had some fun sketches, or skits together. So the only thing I have, and it's not even hardly related, is I mentioned the dramas that we did at our church. Mm-hmm. And one of the Sundays, and by the way, the Sunday morning was seeker oriented. So it was we did a lot more fun stuff and just kind of avant-garde even. But the topic was starting a family or having children, I think, something about that. So the drama I wrote was Adam was telling Eve how they were going to have a baby. Mm-hmm. And God had told him. And so I was Adam and Lisa Vischer was Eve. And we had to have it after the fall because we couldn't obviously be unclothed. So we had these leopard skin outfits that we made out of something. And it's just a really fun drama of her, learning what the process would be. And she goes, well, whose idea was that? And that I said, she goes, let me get this straight. You say, I'm going to start to get a bit of a gut. I'm going to have gas and I'm going to be hungry all the time. I said, yeah, that's pretty much it. She goes, in other words, I'm going to turn into you. But I have that on video.
Oh, man.
It's not VeggieTales related, but it's Dad Asparagus and Junior.
Oh,
this
wow.
Crazy drama as Adam and Eve. So it was interesting. We met in a school. They still meet there in a theater, but we didn't have mics because this was so far back in the 19th century, actually 20th century, 1900s. We didn't have wireless mics, so we just had to project. And I think the audio is pretty good on it, but I'm gonna get that digitized and maybe can enhance the audio. I'll see how it is, and I'll check with Lisa. I have to send her a copy.
I was going to say, definitely let me know. And I don't want to give you any extra work to do. I try not to let my guests leave with obligations beyond the podcast. Yep. But
you'll see us, at one point we're bored. So we're going to play Trivial Pursuit, the game Trivial Pursuit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The problem was there wasn't a whole lot of history yet. So our Trivial Pursuit game only had 3 questions.
I'm shocked they never put that in VeggieTales. That feels like a very VeggieTales joke.
It does, yeah, right. Well, I think Phil wore off on me. I don't think I wore off on him. He wore off on me. His sense of humor was always, way out there.
It could have been a mutual thing. You've got a great sense of humor too. Now, for people who want to do voice acting, for people who want to, I guess the opportunity kind of snuck up on you, right?
Correct.
Like you were going out, like you told me, you weren't auditioning.
Correct.
You weren't going out looking for it. It kind of came to you, and then you took it and ran with it. But for people who want to do voice acting, for people who want to do what you've done, what would your advice be?
Yeah. So, the technical part about how do you get noticed and all that, I would have no idea, although I'm sure you have to somehow get a demo website set up or somehow. I'm sure that's a part of it, but that's not my thing. But I could offer this as a suggestion. I'm sure it's a highly, highly competitive market.
Oh yeah.
And the thing that will set you apart is if you're not prepared, because studio time is really expensive. So my advice would be, depending on what kind of work you want to do, just learn how to be able to read something and do it well and make it like the first and only take. And if you're stumbling around, if you can't, if you're handed something and you have a hard time pronouncing certain words, you'll get marked down as not reliable or takes too much time. Just learn how to nail it the first time, however you can do that. That would be my advice. It wasn't as important with VeggieTales because I didn't have that many lines. But if I had a lot of lines, and especially if they're renting a studio, you need someone who can come in and perform quickly. So there you go.
Yeah, well, I'll keep that in mind. I'm taking notes right now.
Yeah,
because that is one thing I'm looking into. I think voice acting would be incredibly fun.
It's a lot of fun. Yeah, there's the camaraderie with the other characters, and the one thing that was a little regrettable is we didn't really interact with each other.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like we do, and maybe you know this, where I would come in and do my lines, and somebody would be reading the other lines to me. Maybe kind of trying to emulate that character, but not necessarily. And the only episode where I interacted directly and we recorded together was the first episode, where Lisa and I were in that, I mentioned that little broom closet that was barely 3 feet by 3 feet, and we were in there together saying our lines, which I thought was kind of fun. It made it, I think, a little more real, to be saying good night, little mister. Was a little weird, but so you especially if you're going to do characters, you have to, I guess, just practice being in that moment where you're becoming that character with that other character who's not even there.
Yeah, to kind of imagine how they would interact with you, right?
Correct.
Yeah, I've talked to people who have done it both ways. People who get in the booth together. People who, like you said, kind of go back and forth like that. I don't know what I'd prefer. I don't know. I feel like being in that booth and interacting, like you said, would have like a level of realness to it. You really get into the.
It would. The downside is you might start each other laughing.
Yeah, true. Yeah, especially
so there's that.
You got to call them little mister. That could cause a chuckle or two. So of all the lessons, and I asked Phil a similar question, and I like to bring this up to people who had involvement with the original run. The main goal of VeggieTales was to teach a solid biblical lesson. There was nothing, from what I've gathered, more important to the team than getting that lesson to as many people as they could get it to. And that was why whenever NBC got the show and was trying to cut stuff out for television, people weren't thrilled, because you're kind of taking VeggieTales and taking the VeggieTales out of VeggieTales. But of all the lessons you all taught back in the day, which ones do you think are most prevalent now in our world? What do you think we need to remember more than ever?
Yeah. So, when you think about the flow of an episode, it usually centered around maybe one main thing, like, for example, forgiveness, which, I mean, that's a biblical principle, but that's honestly that's something that even the world is trying to teach. But the thing about VeggieTales is at the end, they would bring in the source for the reason for us needing to be forgiven and forgiving and forgiven, and the path for that. And that's through biblical knowledge. And I think if there's any lesson, and it's kind of more like a high level rather than saying, oh, I think forgiveness or I think patience or anything in particular. I think what was so good about VeggieTales is just reinforcing that the Bible was the place to turn to ultimately. And I think that was maybe subtle, but I think that's the message that hopefully a lot of kids caught. And, keep in mind, VeggieTales was not in a vacuum. In other words, you wouldn't rely on that to train up a child how to grow. But that's something the parents would be doing. But it was so great to have this fun animated series with characters they fall in love with, who would reinforce the message that they're getting from their parents. And I think that, to me, would be the biggest lesson to be taken, that, yes, the answer for today's problems and issues that you're having is the Bible.
Yeah, and I think there's a huge difference between telling people you need to do this versus telling people you need to do this and here's a reason why.
Yeah, correct.
Which would be God.
Correct.
Yeah,
exactly.
You can, because a lot of shows I think back then would try to teach a moral. Shows would kind of copy VeggieTales and be like, we're going to do VeggieTales, but without the God stuff. We're going to leave that out. And they would try to do it, and it would just fall flat. Like, why do we have to forgive each other? It makes people feel good. Okay, but there's more to life than making people feel good. Like, why do we have to forgive each other?
True.
Gotta have God.
Yeah, you're just saying be better. Just be better.
Yeah, exactly. For what purpose? For what ultimate
Right.
goal? I don't know. Just do it.
Yeah. Correct.
VeggieTales was not afraid to get into it, and tell you why theologically and
Yeah.
really why you need to do the things they wanted you to do. Like, how would you handle a lesson in handling fear
Yeah.
without the idea that God is watching over you and loves you and cares about you?
Hmm.
Don't be afraid. Why? Because your fears are in your imagination. Now go to bed. Like, you don't
Yeah.
get much from that.
Exactly. No, that's it.
Yeah, I think VeggieTales was groundbreaking for that, and I'm really glad that you all stood your ground and didn't cut anything out, because I know Walmart was like, "Hey, we want to get the shows out there, but we can't have a Bible verse in the show," and Phil was like, "Well, then you don't get the show." And
Right.
like, okay, fine, we'll take the show. Um,
Yeah. Years later, after it became popular and they realized, oh, wait, we can make money off of this. So, yeah, it's funny how they came around.
yeah, yeah, exactly. They went, "Oh, you know what? I guess the Bible verse is okay. We'll take it."
Evidently, there's a market. Okay.
Yeah, no, for real. And you can't go wrong with that. They might be in it to make money, but ultimately they're getting the message to more people,
Correct.
which is a win-win. And I still see VeggieTales DVDs in Walmart, which is really cool.
It
All these
is.
years later, you still see them get brought out, reprints of classic shows and whatnot.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Before we wrap up, and I know you've been doing the voice throughout, and every time you do it, I'm like, oh my gosh. Um, there are a couple lines we go back to in the fandom. We'll send memes around and clips around, and the one that people keep posting is just Dad Asparagus going, "My wife," and Jonah. They're going back and forth, and Bob's going, "I need the phone to call a tow truck," and Dad goes, "My wife." Could we get a "my wife" from Dad?
My wife.
There we go. There we go.
Of course, the most iconic line from Jonah, though.
Uh,
3 words.
well, shoot! Don't tell me. Don't tell me. I'm gonna be
We're in the car careening off the road.
tree, cabin, underwear.
That's
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
That's right. Tree, cabin, underwear.
Oh my gosh.
Live in infamy.
And the other one I go back to is when they're going back and forth, and Bob's like, "2 flat tires. How are we going to change?" She goes, "Usually I'm quite dexterous." People like that one a lot too. Dad has so many great one-liners in the show.
Yeah.
I think
You can thank Phil for that.
but well, I think we can thank you for that too. I think that delivery, you can have that line, but if it didn't have good delivery, then what do we do?
The only time I made a suggestion, well, maybe not the only time, and I can understand why they didn't use it.
Mhm.
And again, it was in Jonah. After we go through the tree, the cabin, the underwear, and we come to a stop, the airbag goes off, right? And everything kind of stops. And I think the line, maybe Larry said, "Are we in heaven?" And I thought a funny line, although I can see why they didn't use it, is Dad would say, "No, we're still in a minivan full of children."
Well,
That's not heaven, but that's not Dad. Dad was more affirming than that.
yeah,
So,
you know what? It would have been more in character for Bob. Yeah, Bob might have said that.
He
Dad,
would have said that.
yeah, Dad
Right.
probably wouldn't have.
Right. And maybe a lot of parents would have resonated with parents, but that's not a message you want to give kids. But I just, in the moment when I was recording, I thought that was funny.
I think that would have been great. People would have related to that for sure.
Yeah.
That dynamic between Bob and Dad, though. I mean, we all pine for that to return. Jonah has to be my favorite project from the show, and that really is a huge part of it. Just that back and forth dynamic,
Yeah. And the music, and I mean, I love when they're in the whale, and
Mhm.
the choir of angels show up. What a great song that was, right?
Gosh, yeah, that was crazy.
Yeah.
And you might find this interesting. I'm not sure. It differs, depending on who I'm talking to, if they really care about the old merchandise and whatnot. Some people hold that more special than others. But I've got do you know what a radio disc is?
No.
No? Okay, so when the movie was coming out, they would have a disc they would give to radio stations to play advertisements and interviews with the characters,
right.
Maybe a bit of a song or whatnot. And they would have like an instrumental track to the song, like Message from the Lord or Second Chances. And they could play that as the people on the radio are going, "We want to talk about the new VeggieTales movie, Jonah, here on whatever radio station it is, random string of numbers.fm. And I have the discs that they gave to the radio station.
Wow.
Play, yeah,
awesome.
Which is a pretty unique thing.
Because I would think most often after it was all done, they just toss them.
Yeah, I think generally they did, because they didn't really want that stuff to get out to me.
Yeah.
Because first thing I did was I plugged in my disc ripper to the computer and got them up online
Of
for
course.
people to listen to. Because
awesome. No, that's great that you've preserved that. That's a part of the whole story.
Thank you so much for making the time to join and to talk to me. I feel like we've gained a lot of new insight into who Dad Asparagus really is, the man behind the asparagus.
There you go. So I'll crawl back into the crisper now, open the fridge and hop in. But thanks for what you're doing. I applaud it, and for just keeping all the, the memories alive. And so thank you. Thank you.
I appreciate that. The show is very special to me, and I feel like I would not, in fact, I know I would not be going into the career I want to go into if it weren't for VeggieTales.
I understand that.
Stuck with me, really stuck with me.
Good. Good.
So what you all did has been wildly impactful. Hearing, I don't know, just talking to you and knowing I grew up my whole life hearing your voice on VHS and DVD, like you were a huge part of my childhood through that character. And to get to talk to you now as an adult is just really cool.
Good. Well, I was thrilled to be a part of it, a small part, but I was thrilled to be a part of it. So I'm glad it had an impact.
It did. And we all appreciate you.
Well, thank you. I started watching Kurt because we were as good of friends with them as with the Vishers. And again, it was fun to watch Kurt's career go from, he was our worship leader. I'm sure you may have mentioned that. Like I say, I haven't watched his yet, but he was a worship leader. And then Phil tapped into him for starting to do the music. And inevitably, as VeggieTales took off, came to a crossroads. I don't know if he shared this, where he had to make a decision. Do I stay with the church because Phil needed someone full time because VeggieTales was taking off, and he had to decide, do I give that up? Do I take a chance and go with Big Idea? And I think he made the right choice.
I think he did.
Big Idea.
Yeah.
And he's so highly talented. And we threw a lot of stuff at him. So like I said, Sunday Morning was seeker oriented. So it wasn't, it was certainly praise songs, but sometimes, like if the topic was celebration, for example, it'd be Celebrate by Kool and the Gang, that would get played. And somehow he was able to orchestrate that with the musicians he had. Or there's one scene where there was a dance, like with the crystal ball came down, the mirrored ball came down.
Oh, yeah.
And he put together, it had to be a certain song, and he put that together. It was amazing. He just had the ability to take whatever, style was thrown at him. So it made sense that he kind of rose to the top as he has.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, he's the key composer to the show.
Yeah, and just really low key, and such a low key sense of humor. Just a lot of fun to be with. You probably caught that in your interview.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. A lot of these people I talk to, like you, I get on call, and I've never talked to you before. I've never met you. I'd never met Phil. I'd never met Kurt. And it feels like I have, like it could just be because I heard your all's voices and music my whole life.
It was a lot of fun, as you can imagine, for me to hear a good friend being interviewed. And, I think I learned some things I didn't know about. So,
and I think I got them at a perfect time too, because the LarryBoy movie had just been announced, right?
Oh, right.
He wasn't thrilled about the fact that he didn't get any call or anything about it, which I'd imagine. I know I'm just yapping now. But I can imagine hearing about a movie about your character on Twitter and nobody's told you, like, man, I wouldn't like that much.
No, I'm glad that's out there for people to see, because they need to know the whole story and just see what an amazing person Phil is. So
it was a dream come true for sure. And talking to you is a dream come true, because I've been trying to get like a handful of people on the show before I kind of wrap up. And I'm like, I got to get Dan Anderson. I got to get Dan Anderson.
Well, good. I'm glad it happened.
I completely forgot. Give me 1 second. I should have started off the podcast with this, but.
Oh, he's going to the closet.
Hold up. There we go.
It must be a tie. I love it.
My brain went, why didn't I have that on? That's too perfect, right?
I have two of them,
Oh, see,
and
if I knew how
both
to
were
tie
gifts,
a tie, it would be
and
better.
I treasure them.
I'm going to do that. I'm not really sure how to actually tie a tie. Probably should know, but
I've signed a number of those too, by the way, which is always fun.